I, like many people, enjoy going to the mall. Last month, I went to the one near me. I got myself some fun stuff and even had lunch at the food court. You know, it was just a pretty standard mall trip. Except there was a new store that had popped up on one of the lower levels. A store dedicated to TikTok trends, of all things. I stepped inside out of morbid curiosity since I don't have the app on my phone, and what I found was simultaneously awful but not shocking by any means. Prints with no artist credits, off-brand bags and phone cases meant to mimic designer ones, ugly hats, and a ridiculous amount of marketable plushies. Sure, there were a handful of Pokemon and Cocomelon plushies, but the vast majority were of mascot horror games. The back wall was lined with Poppy Playtime characters in every color the human eye is capable of seeing, and a few of the Rainbow Friends characters are strung up at the top. I am well aware that I'm not a target demographic for these abominations, but seeing them just made me angry. Is the wider view of indie horror just reduced down to bootleg plushies of the main characters? Is it just a joke to the wider culture of video games? Has the rise of mascot horror caused the downfall of the genre that originally gave it life? I don't believe that there's any right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but I hope that this video can at least give you an understanding of my own opinion. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Alright, first I should address the elephant in the room. What even is mascot horror? If you already know what it is, feel free to skip to the timestamp on screen. If you don't, or maybe you just need a refresher, then mascot horror is a subgenre of indie horror. This subgenre is generally agreed upon as having marketable antagonists that are somewhat off-putting, but not scary. These characters are usually brightly colored and fairly simplistic as to appeal to children, and can be easily converted into plushies and action figures. These games serve as good materials for gaming YouTubers to play through and react to, and for children under 13 to feel a little spooked while watching, but not scared by any means. Some popular examples are Poppy Playtime, Rainbow Friends, and Hello Neighbor. They all have spooky elements to them, such as their environments being unsettling, having jump scares, and possessing a somewhat spooky, quote-unquote deeper story to them that's just interesting enough for YouTubers such as MatPat to dissect them in a theory video. These games are horror in the same way that tomatoes are fruit. They can technically be counted as horror, but I really don't think they should be. Alright, I think we should all be on the same page by now. Since we are, why don't we examine a few popular games from the mascot horror genre and the general indie horror genre and see what conclusions form from there. Let's start off with the most hated of the bunch. Garden of Banban was released on January 6, 2023. It was made and published by the Euphoric Brothers, who, for the life of me, I could not find much about. According to their website, the team is made up of two brothers who say they're passionate about making video games, and that's about it. They have made a few games in the past, but none have been quite as popular as their most recent series. I'll be honest, I haven't played the first game, or, well, any of them, since my laptop starts overheating if it plays Roblox for more than a minute straight, but I have watched multiple playthroughs of the game, so take my critique as you will. You can definitely tell there was some attempt at the first game. The rendering isn't completely awful, the characters have some originality to them, and the way you start the game off with the clock is kind of interesting. I think that's about where my praise for the game ends, though. It really doesn't feel like a kindergarten, if I'm being honest. I haven't been to a kindergarten in a very long time, mind you, but I never remember it looking like this. The mascot characters are more goofy than scary, like, what is this vein texture? I don't think these should be allowed near kids, I'm just saying, like, this bird looks zonked, man, good god. The assets used don't really go together, and not in a good way. There are really great ways to use visuals and different art styles that make the atmosphere more scary because they clash so much, but this isn't one of the times where it's used effectively. Hold on to this idea for later, though. The pancreas line that's used in-game isn't scary. If anything, it just made people believe the game was a parody of newer indie horror games because it just seems so out of place and goofy. I know the developers out there being quirky with it, but they really weren't. It's just dumb, and it's only made worse by the developers making it a reoccurring joke. The first game is easily the weakest of the ones released so far, but hey, at least it's free, which is more than you can say for the others. Despite it all, I can't help but feel a little bit hopeful for the game series' future. It may not be the best series ever, yet you can see the developers making small steps forward with every monthly release. Perhaps someday the Euphoric Brothers will take more time to have their games be based on quality rather than quantity, but I won't hold my breath. I don't think this game needs any introduction. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach came out on December 16th, 2021. It was developed by Steel Wool Studios and published by Scott Cawthon. To say the reviews on this game are mixed would be one of the biggest understatements possibly ever. You can find video after video here on YouTube about people tearing this game to shreds. People have even attempted glitchless runs of the game as a challenge. Sheesh. I even hung out in Fiznom, the creator of FNAF Plus's live stream for an hour or so, and God was it painful to watch.
In the corner, maybe?
Like, what?
God.
What's Vanessa gonna do? Put Freddy back in the dentist chair? Like, I don't know.
Oh my fucking God.
No!
What happened?
No!
Wait, what happened?
What happened?
No, I saw that. I fucking saw it.
Are you kidding me? What was that?
Are you actually serious?
Does that happen with every door? No! It doesn't!
You need to go in.
Oh, there you go. We are content with the game in its current state.
It's easy to see why this game was pulled apart by the wider Five Nights at Freddy's fanbase, even beyond the obvious glitches. The story was sloppy, the game essentially functions as one large fetch quest, there were too many questions left unanswered at the end of the game.
I always come back.
The supposed major antagonist of the game barely has any screen time. Large chunks of the game were just excruciating to play, and it wasn't nearly as scary as other installments in the FNAF series. This is all apparent from me watching a couple different playthroughs and one of my friends letting me play through different segments of the game with them. A lot of people were disappointed in this game, myself included, but there was a lot of care put into this game. I think that's undeniable. The cutscenes are gorgeous, most of the character designs are fun and lively, the soundtrack is amazing, a lot of the locations are really aesthetically pleasing, and I think there's a lot of charm to the gigantic mall we walk around in. It's clear the developers bit off more than they can chew, and were rushing to meet deadlines, which left the game in a less than perfect state. However, even if there were a lot of disappointments from the game, many people found joy in it. This is made very apparent by how much love the fanbase pours into things like art, or cosplays for the game. That's so much more than you can say for Garden of Banban. Plus, the overall reviews for the game on Steam are generally positive, which is leaps and bounds better than the previous game. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach may not be my favorite game on the list of this video, or even from the general franchise, but I would rather play it any day of the week over any of the quick cash grab games being released nowadays. Now for something completely different. Moving away from the mascot horror subgenre into what's more familiar to me, the wider indie horror genre. Amanda the Adventurer was released on April 25th, 2023. The game was developed by Mangled Maw Games and published by DreadXP. Recently, the game has exploded in popularity with Let's Play videos over it gaining millions of views, but Amanda the Adventurer has free demos from as far back as April of 2022 on itch.io. I remember when I was recommended a playthrough of the first demo last year on YouTube, and it's been amazing seeing the evolution of this game with every new demo and eventually the finished product. Amanda the Adventurer is not necessarily the scariest or most visually stunning game I've ever seen, but without a doubt it's a breath of fresh air compared to the plethora of Garden of Banban games this year has seen. The game is a very distinct art style that blends real life with cartoons in such a way that feels off-putting and at times nightmarish. From the puzzles to the tapes, the game does a great job of building an ominous and disturbing atmosphere by twisting the nostalgia in such a way that subverts expectations. I came into the game only expecting to see the VHS tapes were already spooky with their fourth wall breaks and disturbing imagery shown by surprise, but the puzzles caught me off guard. A good example of that being the birthday cake puzzle, where once you figure out how the candles work with the card, the cake melts as a choir of disembodied voices sing to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
The way the tapes and the puzzles fit together make the game feel like a virtual escape room, which I find to be quite fun and unique. The true ending ends the game on a cliffhanger with hopes of a sequel on the horizon, and I would be more than happy to see the story and gameplay expanded upon in the future. I'm honestly really excited for what the developers come up with next. For the last game I'll be talking about today, Omori was released on December 25th, 2020, and it was developed and published by Omocat. There's a chance you might have heard about this game long before its release, since the game itself took 6.5 years to make, and it's easy to see why. Not going out of your way to do side quests or level grinding, the game is easily 24 hours long. This game in particular stands above other games in the indie horror genre due to its beautiful art style, the intense horror that plays with your mind, its emphasis on mental health, the use of music to further not only the overall narrative, but other horror aspects as well, its heart-wrenching endings, the surprise twists and turns, the replayability, and how it won't shy away from uncomfortable topics. There's so many layers to the story and the world you explore that members of the fanbase are still trying to dissect them even years after its release. There's so much put into this game that I hope I could make multiple video essays over it. I find it hard not to fall in love with the game, even if it isn't a usual type of game you might enjoy. While it does a great job of being terrifying just all on its own, what really makes the game special for me is how it shows what I believe to be the most accurate depiction of trauma responses in any media I've ever seen. I've never felt so seen by a video game character's mental state before. Anyways, remember how I said hold on to the idea of clashing art styles to amplify the horror? This game weaponizes that concept against you to create some of the most absolutely terrifying confrontations and atmospheres. Even though I'm on my second playthrough at the time of this video, they still feel unnerving. Genuinely. I get chills whenever I watch some of the scenes in the game again, even just on YouTube. I find it hard to explain everything I love without spoiling a big bulk of the game's twists, so I really encourage you to play this game for yourself if any of the points I've mentioned sound intriguing to you. I believe it's safe to say that mascot horror has not taken indie horror down with it, or that indie horror is dead, or whatever clickbait thumbnails say otherwise. There's a plethora of amazing games that are excelling despite the reputation of indie horror's infamous subgenre. While this is just a small handful of examples, there are so many more amazing indie horror games, both mascot horror and not, that don't try to be cash grabs or half-assed ripoffs. The indie horror scene is not dependent on only the subgenres within it. There are plenty of amazing, incredible, quality games that came from the genre in the past, and there are so many more yet to come in the future. Don't give all your attention to these game developers that don't really care about the content they make and put out into the world. Instead, we should be giving our attention to the ones that make games for more than just money, even if they are a little bit harder to find now.